During my pregnancy announcement party, During my pregnancy announcement party, both my husband and sister-in-law ganged up on me and claimed that they had found evidence of me cheating, only for them to show up at my parents' place a day later, claiming that it was all a prank. But now they're both crying because I told them about the plan I have for the both of them, and they desperately want me to stop because what I'm about to do is not a prank, but rather exposing their dirty business. Hi, the past few days have really been a roller coaster, and I do not know what to make of it. I hope you guys can help me. For some background, I'm married to my husband, Jake. We've been together for years and have a 6-year-old son. Both of us work, but Jake has always been the one to handle our finances. I trusted him with that because he seemed to have a good grip on our financial situation, and I was more focused on my family and career. Everything seemed fine until recently when his sister Megan moved in with us after what she described as a messy breakup with her partner, Tom. Megan was clearly upset, and I wanted to be supportive, so I never questioned her story. I was more concerned with making sure she felt welcomed and comfortable in our home, and I put all my efforts into making sure that she recovered from this horrible breakup. But what happened at my pregnancy announcement party just flipped a switch in my head. We had gathered close family and friends to share the news of our new baby. The house was filled with laughter, and everyone was excited. I had spent days planning this event, making sure every detail was perfect, from the decorations to the food. It was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of our lives, a memory we could look back on with joy. As I stood in the living room, ready to make the announcement, Jake and Megan exchanged a look that I didn't quite understand at the time. I brushed it off, thinking they were just excited or nervous about the news. But just as I started to share our big news, the atmosphere shifted. Jake and Megan stepped forward, and the room fell silent as they abruptly interrupted me. Without any warning, Jake and Megan came to me and started asking how I could do this. For a second, I just laughed because I thought it was some joke. But after a while, reality struck me. They were accusing me of cheating. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. They claimed they had evidence, something undeniable, something that proved I had betrayed Jake and our family. My heart pounded in my chest as they laid out their accusations in front of everyone. It was like a bad dream, surreal and terrifying. Nothing made sense. They were just saying random words and not explaining a single thing. I was simply lost. The guests were stunned, their expressions shifting from joy to confusion and disbelief. I could feel their eyes on me, judging and questioning. Jake and Megan sounded so convincing and so final that I think everybody assumed I was guilty. I stood there frozen, trying to process what was happening. I kept searching their faces, hoping to see some sign that this was a joke or a mistake, but there was nothing. They were serious, and the more they talked, the more isolated I felt. It wasn't just the shock of the accusations, it was the way they were delivered, so cold, so calculated. They had planned this, rehearsed it, and now they were executing it in front of my friends and family. How could they accuse me of something so terrible without a shred of evidence? What was the point of this? The more I questioned, the more they doubled down, as if my confusion and pain were proof of my guilt. The people I trusted most were turning on me in the most public, humiliating way. After Jake was done shouting, he stormed out of the room, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. I just stood there, my heart racing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The guests, clearly uncomfortable and unsure of what to do, began to murmur amongst themselves. It must have been so awkward for them, caught in the middle of such a personal and public spectacle. Slowly, one by one, they started to leave, offering awkward glances and half-hearted goodbyes. I couldn't blame them. They didn't know what to believe, and I didn't have the strength to explain. I wanted to ask Megan what all of this was about, to demand some sort of explanation, but before I could even gather my thoughts, she rushed out of the house with her mom, not sparing me a single glance. I felt completely abandoned, the walls of the house that once felt like a home closing in on me. The place that had been filled with laughter and love just moments ago now felt cold and suffocating. I couldn't stay there for another second. With tears streaming down my face, I quickly packed a bag, grabbed my son, and left. I didn't know where to go, so I just drove aimlessly until I ended up at a small hotel on the edge of town. It was far enough away from everything that I could breathe again, but close enough that I could still feel the weight of what had happened pressing down on me. I checked in under a different name, hoping to keep a low profile. I didn't want to face anyone, my friends, my family, because in their eyes I was a cheater, and I had no way to prove otherwise. My mind kept replaying the events of the evening, trying to make sense of Jake and Megan's actions, but nothing added up. How could they do this to me? What had I done to deserve such a cruel and humiliating attack? The next day, as I sat in the hotel room trying to keep myself together for the sake of my son, there was a knock on the door. And there they were, Jake and Megan. Somehow they had found me. It must have been through my dad. He was the only one who knew where I was. I didn't even have time to process how they had tracked me down before they started talking through their apologies. They claimed that the whole thing was just a prank. They said they never meant for it to go so far, that they thought it would be funny, or that it was some twisted way to test my loyalty to Jake. The more they talked, the more absurd and infuriating their excuses became. A prank. They had humiliated me in front of everyone we knew, turned my world upside down, and they expected me to believe it was all a joke. But as they continued to beg for my forgiveness, something clicked. Their desperation wasn't just about the prank itself, it was about what I had started to uncover after the party. I had recently been checking our savings and finances just to make sure we had enough to adjust to our new baby in the family, and I found a big hole in our savings. It wasn't just a small discrepancy either. Thousands of dollars were missing, and it didn't make any sense. I also noticed that our credit card balance had been growing, and the due fees were piling up. We always paid off our balance in full every month, so this was completely out of character for us. My biggest question was, where was this lump sum of money going? I brought it up to Jake, asking for the credit card bills to understand what was going on, but he got really defensive. Instead of explaining, he turned it around on me, questioning whether I trusted him. He made it seem like my concern was an attack on his integrity, which only made me more suspicious. I decided not to push the issue further at that moment, but the whole situation didn't sit right with me. To make matters worse, Megan came to me later out of the blue, telling me that I should never doubt Jake, that he was 1 in a million, and that I was lucky to have him. It was strange and unsolicited, almost as if she knew about the conversation I had with Jake and wanted to reinforce his narrative. All of this irked me and made me even more uneasy, so I started keeping an eye on our bank statements and financial records more closely. As I combed through our accounts, I discovered something alarming. Jake had been transferring money to Megan. The transactions were disguised as harmless payments, but the amounts were too large and too frequent to ignore. He had been slowly siphoning off money from our savings and funneling it to Megan's account. The timeline of these transfers coincided with when Megan had supposedly moved in with us after her breakup, which now seemed more like a cover story than the truth. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Jake had always handled our finances, and I had trusted him implicitly. But now it was clear that he had been hiding things from me. Big things. The missing money, the unpaid credit card bill, Megan's sudden appearance in our home had all started to make sense, but not in the way I had hoped. I realized that Jake and Megan had concocted this whole story to distract me from their real activities. Megan wasn't just staying with us because she was heartbroken. She was hiding from the consequences of her actions. The money Jake was sending her wasn't a loan or a gift. It was part of a larger scheme to cover up her embezzlement from the business she had run with Tom. As this all clicked into place, I knew I couldn't stay silent. Jake and Megan had tried to manipulate me with their so-called prank at the pregnancy announcement party, hoping to throw me off the scent of their dirty business. But instead of deterring me, it had only made me more determined to uncover the truth. Now, at the hotel, Jake and Megan were in full panic mode, desperately trying to convince me that the accusations at the party were just a joke, a poorly thought-out prank that had gone too far. But I saw through their lies. I knew now what they were really afraid of, that I had figured out their scheme and that I wasn't going to let them get away with it. They pleaded with me to forgive them, to keep this all between us, but I was done playing their game. I told them everything I had discovered, how I knew about the money transfers, how I had pieced together Megan's lies, and how their so-called prank had only served to expose the depth of their betrayal. Their faces turned ashen as they realized I wasn't just bluffing. I told them that I was going to expose everything to our friends and families. I didn't tell them about this, but if necessary, I would also let the authorities know. This wasn't just about the money, it was about the trust they had broken and the lengths they had gone to deceive everyone around them. They had used me, manipulated me, and now it was their turn to face the consequences. I could tell that they were now genuinely concerned about what I knew. Jake and Megan broke down in tears, begging me to reconsider, to think about the impact this would have on our lives. But I didn't care anymore, just like my husband hadn't before calling me a cheater in front of our families. This wasn't a prank, and I wasn't about to let them off the hook. They had made their choices, and now they would have to deal with the fallout. After a while, I got tired of hearing their meaningless apologies and called security, asking them to escort Jake and Megan out. As Jake was leaving, he turned to me and said that he knew he had made a mistake and was sorry for what he had done. But if I moved ahead with my plan, I would be destroying our son's and unborn child's life. His words hit me harder than I expected. I pretended to stay strong, but that one sentence kept echoing in my mind. Now I'm left wondering if this is really worth it. If I move ahead with exposing my husband and sister-in-law, it would almost certainly lead to divorce, and our family would be broken beyond repair. Our children would grow up with their parents at odds, and everything we've built together would be torn apart. That's why I want you guys to guide me. Am I the asshole for wanting to expose my husband and sister-in-law after their so-called prank, even if it means potentially destroying my family? Update 1. Hi guys, hope you're all doing well. First and foremost, thank you for leaving so many supportive comments. I also saw some questions, so I'll try to answer all of them. There were many questions regarding what exactly was the dirty business that my husband and my sister-in-law were involved in. Well, to be truthful, I wasn't fully aware either up until some days ago. To understand the whole thing, I reached out to Tim, Megan's ex-boyfriend. Initially, he was a little reluctant to go into detail about the incident, but after I told him what had happened recently with me, he was happy to tell me everything. The dirty business I uncovered was a complex web of financial fraud and deceit that had been going on for months right under my nose. As I dug deeper into our finances and Megan's past, a disturbing picture began to emerge. It all started with Megan's supposed messy breakup that led her to move in with us. In reality, there was no breakup at all, at least not in the romantic sense. Megan had been running a small business with her partner, Tom. Over the course of several months, she and Jake had been systematically embezzling funds from the company, siphoning off small amounts at first, then growing bolder as time went on. When Tom finally discovered the discrepancies in their accounts, Megan panicked. Instead of owning up to her actions, she turned to Jake for help. My husband, ever the protective older brother, made the fateful decision to assist her in covering up the crime. Jake's role in this scheme was far more involved than I could have imagined. He helped Megan launder the stolen money through our personal accounts. They set up a series of complex transfers, moving funds between multiple accounts to obscure their origin. Jake, who had always handled our finances, was able to hide these transactions from me for months. The amounts involved were staggering. Over $100,000 had been embezzled from Tom's business, and all of it had passed through our accounts at some point. Jake had been using his knowledge of the financial system to create a paper trail that would be difficult for anyone to follow. But their deception went beyond just hiding money. They fabricated an entire narrative about Megan's life to explain her sudden presence in our home. The story of her bad breakup, her emotional distress, and her need for family support was all a carefully constructed lie designed to prevent anyone from looking too closely at the real reason she had left her old life behind. As I pieced together the timeline, I realized that their scheme had been unraveling in the weeks leading up to my pregnancy announcement. My increased interest in our finances as we prepared for a baby had made Jake nervous. Megan, too, was feeling the pressure as Tom had begun making noise about involving authorities if she didn't return the money. Their prank at my pregnancy announcement party was a desperate attempt to create a distraction. They hoped that by causing a scene and putting me on the defensive, they could buy themselves more time to cover their tracks. It was a cruel and calculated move, using what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life as a smokescreen for their crimes. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep their deception ran. They had lied to me, to our families, to Tom, and to everyone around us. They had abused my trust, used our home as a base for their illegal activities, and potentially put our future and the future of our unborn child at risk. This wasn't just a simple case of poor judgment or a momentary lapse in ethics. It was a carefully planned campaign of fraud and manipulation that had been going on for the better part of a year. The two people I trusted most in the world had been living double lives, presenting a facade of normalcy while engaging in criminal activities behind the scenes. And after a lot of thinking and reading through your advice, I realized that what Jake and Megan did to me at my pregnancy announcement party was unforgivable. They betrayed my trust, used our finances to cover up their crimes, and then had the audacity to humiliate me in front of our loved ones too. Just forgiving them without any consequences would only encourage them to continue doing whatever they want, believing they can escape without repercussions. So I've made up my mind. I'm planning to let both Jake and my family know everything. They need to understand the full extent of what's happened here and how deeply it has affected me. I know it's going to be a difficult conversation, but it's something that needs to be done. I can't keep this secret any longer, and they deserve to face the consequences of their actions. I'll let you guys know as soon as that happens. Update 2. Hello, people. Thank you all for your patience and support. I finally did what I said I would. I gathered our friends and family to expose Jake and Megan's lies. It wasn't easy, especially considering the last time they had seen me, I was accused of being a cheater. The whispers had spread like wildfire. Many of them even believed I was pregnant with someone else's baby. Convincing them to meet was an uphill battle, but I knew I had to do it. I reached out to each of them personally, explaining that I had something crucial to reveal, something that would change everything they thought they knew. There was skepticism, hesitation, and a lot of awkwardness. But eventually they agreed to hear me out. When everyone finally gathered, the tension in the room was palpable. I could see the mix of doubt and curiosity in their eyes, but I was determined. I took a deep breath and started from the beginning, laying out the timeline of events that had led to this moment. The room was silent as I explained how I had been going over our finances, discovering the missing money, and how Jake had reacted so defensively when I asked him about it. I described how Megan had tried to convince me that I was doubting a husband who was one in a million. But I knew just my words wouldn't be enough to convince everyone, especially after the accusations against me. So I came prepared with proof, bank statements, credit card bills, and all the evidence I had painstakingly gathered. I laid them out in front of everyone, showing the series of transactions that revealed how Jake had been transferring money to Megan, helping her cover up her embezzlement. Then I brought in my trump card, Tom. The last time we had met to discuss everything, he had volunteered to stand by me as a witness. He was respected by my in-laws, admired even, and I knew his words would carry weight. As he recounted the story of how Megan and Jake had been systematically stealing from the business, the disbelief in the room was almost tangible. My mother-in-law's face turned pale as the realization dawned on her, while my father-in-law shook his head in disbelief. This was a truth that none of them had ever imagined. Two people they loved and trusted had been deceiving them all along. Finally, I addressed the elephant in the room, the cheating accusations that Jake and Megan had thrown at me during the pregnancy announcement party. I revealed what they had later told me about it being a prank, but I made it clear that I had no physical proof to offer them. I looked each of them in the eye and told them they were welcome to go through my laptop and phone if they needed reassurance. I had nothing to hide because I had never done anything wrong. The room was quiet for what felt like an eternity. I could see the shock etched on everyone's faces, especially my mother-in-law and father-in-law. My mother-in-law looked utterly devastated, struggling to reconcile the image of their beloved children with the reality of what they had done. My father-in-law, on the other hand, was visibly angry, his hands clenched into fists as he listened to Tom recount how Jake and Megan had siphoned money from the business and manipulated everyone around them. I understood it was a lot for them to take in. Their world had just been turned upside down. Then my own family reacted. My parents, who had initially believed the cheating accusations and had distanced themselves from me, were now full of remorse. My mother's voice cracked as she apologized over and over again, telling me how sorry she was for doubting me and how ashamed she felt. My father, usually so stoic, looked at me with tears in his eyes and kept saying that he failed me and was sorry. As the revelation sank in, a couple of relatives came forward with additional information about Megan. One of my cousins mentioned that Megan had borrowed money from her a while back, claiming she was in a bad spot after her breakup with Tom. She had never returned the money, and whenever the topic was brought up, Megan would start crying about how terrible things were with Tom, making everyone feel sorry for her and dropping the issue. Another relative shared a similar story, and it became clear that Megan had been manipulating those around her for quite some time. By the end of it, the room was a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief. My in-laws were heartbroken, struggling to come to terms with the fact that their children had done something so atrocious. My parents were filled with guilt for not standing by me when I needed them most. And even though Jake and Megan weren't there, their absence spoke volumes. The betrayal was deep, and the fallout was only beginning. I could see the pain in everyone's eyes, but I knew I had done the right thing. Jake and Megan had manipulated everyone around them for too long, believing they could escape without consequences. This was no longer about saving face or keeping up appearances. It was about making sure that they faced the repercussions of their actions. I am pretty sure that when Jake and Megan hear about this, they will have a wild reaction. But there is way too much to care about, and I cannot keep all this burden on my shoulders for long. For now, I feel a sense of relief knowing that my family knows the truth. Hopefully, things will get better in the future. Whatever happens next, you guys will be the first ones to know. Update 3. It's been a while since I last posted, and so much has happened that I hardly know where to start. First and foremost, I'm no longer staying at the hotel. After everything that went down, my parents asked me to come and stay with them. They insisted it was because they didn't want to miss the opportunity to take care of my son and the baby on the way. But I know part of it is due to the guilt they felt for not believing me initially. Regardless, I decided to accept their offer. It's been comforting to be back home, especially since I'm pregnant and constantly moving from one place to another isn't ideal. Being in one place, surrounded by people who genuinely care for me, has been a relief, even if it's just temporary. Despite the relative peace I found here, Jake and Megan have continued to reach out, though for very different reasons. Jake's been on a never-ending apology tour since the truth came out. When he first learned that I had exposed him and Megan to our families, he was a bit angry, but he quickly shifted back to his apologetic tone. It's like he's caught between wanting to express his remorse and feeling betrayed that I brought everything to light. He keeps saying he wants to meet our son, and I know I should probably let them see each other, but honestly, I just don't have the emotional energy right now. The events of the past few days have taken a toll on me, physically and mentally. I've explained this to Jake, but he seems to think I'm purposely avoiding him. Maybe I am, but after everything that's happened, can you really blame me? He's tried to visit several times, but I've asked my parents to keep him away for now. I just can't face him yet. Every time I think about the betrayal, the lies, and how easily he could have ruined my life with his accusations and deceit, I feel sick. Yet part of me wonders if there's any way we could ever come back from this. Not as a couple, but at least as co-parents. But then again, how could I ever trust him again? Megan, on the other hand, has been nothing short of a nightmare. After the whole revelation to the family, she's made it a point to bombard me with texts and voicemails filled with every slur and insult imaginable. I suspect that some of our relatives filled her in on everything, especially the part where I involved Tom. She's absolutely enraged about that. But what did she expect? They left me with no other choice. I had to protect myself and expose the truth, even if it meant dragging out all their dirty laundry. As much as I've tried to shield my son from all the drama, I can't deny that it's affected him too. He was there when Jake and Megan accused me of cheating at the pregnancy announcement party, so he's aware that something's not right, even though I've done my best to keep him out of it. It breaks my heart every time he asks where his dad is and why he isn't visiting. I've been telling him that Jake is on a business trip and will be back soon, but I know this lie can only last so long. I don't want to paint Jake as the villain, at least not in front of our son. He doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess, and I want to protect him from the harsh reality as much as I can. All of this has left me questioning my next steps, especially when it comes to divorce. After everything Jake has done, I don't trust him at all. Every time I think about our future together, all I can see are the lies, the betrayal, and the pain he's caused. But then I think about our children, and that's when I start to get cold feet. My son already knows his father, and if I go through with a divorce, my unborn baby might never get the chance to know theirs. The thought of that is terrifying. I'm caught between wanting to break free from this toxic situation and the fear of what it would mean for my children's future. The idea of being a single mom is daunting, especially with a new baby on the way. I don't want to be tied to Jake for the rest of my life, but I also don't want to make a decision that I'll regret. Divorce seems like the only logical step, but the thought of going through with it scares me. What if it's the wrong choice? What if my kids suffer because of it? At the end of the day, I know I need to think about what's best for my children and myself. Jake's betrayal isn't something I can just forgive and forget, and Megan's continued harassment only solidifies my resolve. But making the final decision still feels overwhelming. I'm taking it day by day, trying to focus on the positives, being back home with my parents, having their support, and knowing that I'm doing what I can to protect my son and my unborn baby. Thank you all for your advice and support. It's been a lifeline for me during this difficult time. I'm still trying to figure out the best path forward, but knowing that I have a community of people who understand and care means the world to me. I'll keep you updated as things progress. Until then, I'll be taking it one step at a time, hoping that I find the strength to make the right decisions for my family. See you soon, Reddit. Update 4. Hi, this might be my last update, and I'll keep it short and crisp. I read your comments, and thanks to your guidance, I decided to move forward with a divorce. A few days ago, I invited Jake over to see our son. It was the first time we'd been in the same room since everything went down, and I knew it was the right moment to break the news. When I told him about my decision, he did what he's been doing this whole time. He apologized, said he could change, and insisted that we could work things out. But I knew that staying with him would only lead to more pain in the future. It wouldn't be good for my kids to grow up in an environment filled with mistrust and resentment. So I made it clear that the divorce was happening, but I assured him that he would still be able to see our son regularly without any issues. As for Megan, I've let her know through our relatives that if she continues with her harassment, this matter could easily escalate into a court case. I reminded her that this wouldn't be a good look for her at all, given everything that's already come to light. Ever since then, the messages have stopped, and I've finally been able to have some peace. I finally feel like I can breathe and have a sense of closure. I know this isn't the end. There's still a long road ahead, but at least the path forward is a bit clearer now. I'm focusing on myself, my son, and the baby on the way, and that's what truly matters. Thank you all for your support and advice. It's been invaluable in helping me navigate this difficult time. I'm ready to start this new chapter, and I hope it leads to a brighter future for me and my children. Take care, Reddit. Stay tuned for more stories.